After a couple chapters filled with fighting and disobedience, the next part of the story is a welcome break. We'll learn about a family that was caught up in this cycle of disobedience, of rebellion, of restoration in the nation of Israel. Well, why do we learn about one family? I mean, wouldn't their fate be the same as everyone else in Israel? Wouldn't we be able to replace the name of this family with the name of countless families throughout the nation? Well, let's continue on to find out why. Our story begins this way.
In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. This man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Kilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there.
If you remember, Israel was caught in a cycle in their relationship with God. They would serve Him for a while and then follow foreign people and their gods. That would cause them to come under God's judgment, and then they would cry out to help. God would send a judge to deliver them. Well, perhaps it was during one of the cycles of God's judgment that there becomes a famine in the land of Israel. The famine was so severe that our family, father, mother, and 2 sons, choose to leave Israel and go to a neighboring country in search of food. The fact that they could cross a border to a new land and find food seems to indicate that this indeed was part of God's judgment. Well, the family moves into the country of Moab, and there they settle in. In fact, they settle in so well that both the boys marry Moabite women. Well, a few years later, and due to circumstances that the Bible doesn't indicate, all the men die off. And this family is now left with only 3 widows. After some time, God restored the nation of Israel, and Naomi saw this as her opportunity to go back to her homeland. So she started the journey with her daughters-in-law so they could get back to the place of her birth. Well, along the way, Naomi realized that the younger women really didn't need to go back to that country. They didn't need to go to Israel. So she gave them the freedom to stay in Moab among their people, to marry again, and to serve their gods. Well, one of the daughters-in-law took her up on that offer, but the other one responded quite differently. In some of the most beautiful words of commitment ever expressed, Ruth of Moab lets Naomi know she will be staying by her side.
But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her.
Why would Ruth choose to make such a commitment? Why would she go to a new land with a woman who was now old and bitter? Yes, Naomi was a bitter woman. In fact, when she returned to her land, she told her friends, "Don't call me Naomi anymore," because Naomi meant pleasant. She said, "Instead, call me Mara," which means bitter. Because of the loss of her husband and sons, she was returning to Israel as a bitter woman. So why did Ruth choose to follow and be committed? Well, look again and see the hand of God in that. We see about His sovereignty in this decision, and we'll learn more about that later in the story. In the meantime, we are struck by the nature of Ruth's commitment to Naomi. In fact, Ruth's words have found their way into modern wedding ceremonies as an expression of the love relationship between a husband and wife. These are words of commitment, of selfless giving, of unconditional love. This was the kind of love that God was looking for from His people, the kind of commitment, and here we find it coming from someone from the outside. Well, Ruth lived out the nature of this commitment in a very practical way by providing for the needs of her family. It was a practice of the day that the poor would go into the field after the harvested had gathered the crop and pick up what was ever left. And in this way, this tangible commitment of love between Ruth and Naomi was clearly expressed.